Hello, this is Annette from needlepointers.com, and today I would like to show you how to make a baby crib quilt. For this quilt I used a focal point of some panels in the middle, which you can use panels or you can just use fabric. If you visit our website, we have a photo tutorial with step-to-step instructions on how to make this. Just click the iCard or the link in the description below. I found this cute fabric that has panels on it for the Peter Rabbit quilt on the internet. And I also purchased some fabric to go with it. Now on the internet I did find a pattern. It was called Garden Tales by Quilting Treasures, but the quilt was too large for a crib size quilt, so I had to revise it down. And what I did was, on graph paper, I made a chart. I measured my blocks, or the panel, and I noticed that it was about 5 inches would be a nice size. I did not want to use this outside fabric. I just wanted to use the panel in the middle. So when I designed the pattern, the block in the middle is going to be 5 inches. Then I'm going to put a color around the outside, and that's going to be 2 inches, and then in between is some sashing, which is 1 inch, and some of the sashing is going to be 2 inches. I will be telling you more about cutting the fabric later on, but before I do that, I need to wash my fabric. This is a baby quilt, and I want to get out any of the sizing or anything that's in there. And sometimes when you wash your fabric, it frays along the where it was cut. So I have a tutorial on how to prevent fraying when you pre-wash your fabric, and there will be a link in the description below, and also an iCard. So I'm going to start washing the fabric, and then I'll show you the next step on making this baby crib quilt. The baby quilt will be made with 9 blocks, and in order to do those, what you need is the center one is finished to 5 inches, so you need to cut 9 squares, panels, or just some printed fabric that are 5.5 by 5.5 inches. And then, as you see, you put around it the border. And to do that, for each panel or block, you're going to need 2 pieces that are 2.5 inches by 5.5 inches, and 2 pieces that are 2.5 inches by 9.5 inches. Now you can use any color combination that you would like, and we will begin by sewing the shorter pieces together first on the outside of the block, and then the longer pieces. When you sew this quilt, you're going to be using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and if you have a presser foot, a 1/4 inch presser foot, that's ideal for this situation. And you put the short side onto the panel and start sewing. And you do not have to back tack when you're doing this, or back stitch, because the stitching will be in the seams and it'll be held together that way. And you do the other side. And now I'm going to go and with the iron, I'm going to press these with the seam going to the darker side, which is the green. And then I'll show you, we'll stitch the longer side on. Okay, I have it pressed as you see. Okay, now we'll put the longer pieces on, matching it up at the end, and then sew again using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And let's do the other side. Again, I will press it and then continue to do this until you have 9 blocks completely completed. After finishing the 9 squares, lay them on the table the way you would like to see them on the quilt. The next step will be to sew the rows together using a sashing that is 1½ inches by 9½ inches long. You will need 6 of those. Carefully bring the squares, 1 row of squares, over to the sewing machine in the order that you want them sewn together. Then place the sashing on the one side, and stitch. Okay, line up the next square on the top of it. The square will be over like on this side, so it would go like this. Okay, and continue sewing them together, your rows, and after you have them sewn, then press the seam allowance towards the sashing, like that. After the rows are sewn together, cut 6 pieces of sashing 1½ inch by 29½ inches. Sew 1 strip of sashing to the top and 1 strip of sashing to the bottom of each row. Press the seams towards the sashing. As you can see, I finished adding the 1½ inch sashing to the top and the bottom of each row. Now I'm going to add another sashing. To do this, you cut strips 3 inches by 29½ inches. As you can see on the floor, I have put them where I will be sewing them, between each row and also at the top and the bottom. I finished adding the 3-inch sashing between the rows and at the top and the bottom. You can stop here and sew a 1½ inch sashing strip on each side and then add a 3-inch sashing strip on each side. You would then layer the quilt, quilt it, and bind it. However, since this quilt is a Peter Rabbit quilt, I am going to add a fence border to the top and the bottom of the quilt before adding the side sashings. I have finished my first fence border, and now I'd like to tell you how to do it. The first thing you need to do is to cut your material. From the fence material, you need to cut 7 pieces, 3½ inches by 3½ inches. From the fence material, cut 7 pieces that are 3½ inches by 2 inches. And then from the background fabric, cut 14 pieces that are 2 inches by 2 inches, and with a pencil, put a diagonal line from corner to corner. The part of the fence that we are making right now are the posts. So with your 3½ by 2 inch piece, place your 2 inch by 2 inch piece with right sides together on the top of it, and we are going to be sewing diagonally from corner to corner. Along the line. Trim away the excess about 1/4 of an inch from the seam. And we are going to press it open with the seam towards the background fabric. Okay, see, and I have it pressed. Now, take another piece, your 2-inch square, place it on top, and again, we're going to stitch from corner to corner along the line. We have made the top of the picket fence. Take the 3.5-inch square, and again, with right sides together, line them up and stitch using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Press again, but this time press the seam allowance toward the 3.5-inch square. The first fence post is complete. Continue to make 6 more. Now it is time to make the fence rails. Cut strips from the background fabric selvage to selvage, 2 inches wide, and also a strip that is 2 3/4 inches wide. From the fence fabric, cut a strip that is 1 1/4 inch wide, and then sew the 3 strips together with the fence one in the middle. Now we're going to cut the rails. To do that, you're going to cut 6 that are 1 1/2 inch wide. And then you're going to cut 2 that are 1 5/8 inch wide. I'm going to continue to cut my strips, and then I'll show you what to do next. Set aside the 2 strips that you cut that were 1 5/8 inches wide. Take your piece that is your fence post, place a piece of your fence rail on the top of it with wrong sides together, and what you're going to do is you're going to match up these 2 seams. Now I like to just put a pin to make sure that I'm matching them up, and I put the pin through, I look on the other side, and if the pin is also on the seam line on the other side, I know I have them matched up correctly. Sew them together using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Remove the pin when you get to it if you're using a pin, and continue sewing. Okay, that's the first one. Okay, now add another fence post. Again, match up the seams and continue to add fence rails and fence posts until you have them all done. Then on each end you're going to be adding the fence rail that is 1 5/8 inches on the ends. I'm finished sewing the fence border, and what I did was I pressed the seams towards the railing on these because otherwise it would be too bulky. Then find the middle of the border, and I placed a pin. Find the middle of your quilt top, put them right sides together, and pin. And you can put a couple pins on it. I'm going to put one on the end and probably another one right in the middle to hold it in place. And then what you're going to do is sew it using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance and sew the border on. To finish piecing this quilt top, you need to add 2 more borders. One here, that's going to be a small one, and then a larger one next to it. To do this, you need to measure the side of your quilt. In my case, it was 53 inches. And then cut 2 strips 1.5 inches by that measurement, and 2 strips 3 inches by that measurement. And then we will be sewing these sashing strips onto the side of the quilt. The baby quilt top made by using panels is complete. I hope you enjoyed following along with me as I made this project. To finish the quilt, you can do it as you would like. You can use the pillowcase method or the traditional method of layering, quilting, and binding. If you would like a photo tutorial with written step-by-step instructions for making this baby quilt top, visit our website needlepointers.com. Please like, share, and comment. Subscribe to our channel so you do not miss future videos, and follow us on Facebook, Pinterest, and Twitter. Also visit our website needlepointers.com for quilting information and lots of free projects.